Surah Al-Humazah, it appears from, it's 9 verses, very straightforward. However, this is one of the eloquent, short surahs of the Quran, and that eloquence of the Quran, the eloquence of obviously of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what we call al-i'jaz al-lughawi. I don't like to use the word miraculousness necessarily here, and I've given talks about this before, but it's one of the signs of this, the power of the Quran and the language and how everything is tied together, meaning there's nothing random in the Quran, there's not an extra word, there's nothing that's out of place, and everything matches and is succinct, and it's very well put. And this surah is one of these examples. And so inshallah ta'ala we're going to dive into it a little bit today and kind of demonstrate that through talking about the surah. Of course, the surah itself is called Al-Humazah. Sometimes it's called Waylun likulli humazatin lumazah, meaning the whole, they use the whole first verse as its name. It is a Meccan surah, which means it was revealed in Mecca. This is by unanimous, all the scholars agree upon this. There is a difference of opinion on who is it referring to. So in the beginning, the first few verses are talking about, it seems to be talking about a specific individual, right, who has certain characteristics. And this question appears throughout the Quran, and we've proposed it many times, and we'll propose it again here, which is it talking about a specific person, or is it talking about these traits that this person has? And the answer is, it's both. Meaning, there could very well have been, and in fact I do believe, and many scholars actually do believe this, that when it was revealed in Mecca, it was very relevant for the Prophet ﷺ in what he was facing from the disbelievers of Quraysh. Right, in terms of their hems and their lems and all these other things that they were doing. So there very well could have been specific individuals, and in fact some of them are mentioned in some of the books of tafsir. Will open up and they say it's Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira. Some say it's Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayyid. Some say it's Ubay ibn Khalaf. Some say it's Umayyah. Whoever it was, a lot of these people, they have commonalities, and that a lot of them were very wealthy. All of these people were very wealthy. They were merchants. They used to harm the Muslims through their words and their actions, which is what the surah is referring to. However, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left it vague for us means that it still carries its relevance to us today. So it's not just relevant to the Prophet ﷺ, because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had named him very specifically in the surah, obviously that means the relevance would end there. We could probably read into it some relevance. However, leaving it vague, and this is where the Quran has that multi-layered, multi-dimensional aspect to it that a lot of other books do not, which makes it an eternal book, truly an eternal book. And by the way, this is of testimony even by non-Muslims. They say that it's beneficial. There's that one guy, hey, Umar is nodding his head. We both read this in this book. This guy is saying that you should start your day. Look at this guy. He's writing a book about minimalism. And I think that's the title of his book. Essentialism. Aywa. Nawwar Allahu alayk. So he says, the guy, you should start. It is beneficial for a person. This guy's a non-Muslim. He says to start his day by spending roughly 30 minutes reading a book that is timeless. It's an eternal, you can pick up any eternal book, meaning it's not a timely book in the sense that it's modern, for example. It's a book that applies across time. And it says, I have a list of 10 here that seem to me to be eternal. And one of them, number 3 on his list, is the Quran. And he says, I spend 30 minutes reading these books every day. Think about this. There's a non-Muslim out there, and this blew my mind. There's a non-Muslim out there who arguably spends 30 minutes with the Quran in the morning at Fajr, and we struggle to get Muslims to open up the Quran and read it. And they don't know the benefit. And this guy is talking about the benefit to him. And he's saying, he's like, this helps you focus, it grounds you, etc., etc. And it's just like, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. What do we need to do so that these Muslims can grab a hold of their own book and start reading it more, right? It is a timeless book. And it's because it has this dimensionality, meaning, and multi-layered elements. One of it is this, that yes, It was very relevant for the Prophet ﷺ, and in fact it could very well have been referring to a person and the Prophet ﷺ knew exactly who it was. Meaning there probably was an incident in which a person did hams and lams. Both of these, we'll talk about what they mean. And then the surah was revealed to comfort the Prophet ﷺ as a threat to this individual. People read it, they recited it. The person knew that it was talking about him, yet it still didn't stop him. Very well could have happened. And it seems to be the case that this actually did happen. However, in leaving it like this, it remains applicable even for us now in 2022. Right? Which is jarring to say that out loud, but this is the reality. And this means that anybody who harms the Muslims, whether physically, verbally, mocking them, ridiculing them, etc., there's a severe threat, which is what this surah contains. Very good. So this is in terms of relevance, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll jump into the surah. What does it mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up the first verse and He says, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Wail is a threat. It's a dua. It's a prayer against someone. Now, many mufassirin have said Wail is also the name of a valley, Wadi fi Jahannam. This is correct, and it's been narrated. However, initially, this seems to be a later addition. Initially, the Arabs used the word Wail to be a dua against somebody. Woe to you. It's a threat. This is very clear from the language. So it's a threat. It's a dua against. And the rule, by the way, in the Quran is that any dua that's mentioned in the Quran فَهُوَ دُعَاءٌ مُسْتَجَابٌ. As a rule. This is mufassirin, many have mentioned this. So any dua that's mentioned in the Quran هو بمعنى أنه استجيب أصلا ولا يرد الدعاء إلا وهو مقبول في القرآن. Which means that any dua that exists in the Quran is an answered dua as long as the conditions apply to the individual who's actually, it's for or against. Which is why many of the companions, when they would hear the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah recited, what would they do? They would say Ameen. Even in Salah. Why? Because the last two verses are a dua. Now they wouldn't say it out loud like the same Ameen as they do in Surah Al-Fatiha, but many companions are on the record saying, yeah, we would say Ameen. Because it's a dua. You want Allah to accept Ameen. So anytime you hear a dua, you say Ameen. Even if it's in Salah, that's not a problem. Because obviously we say Ameen in the Salah already. Okay? So, this is a dua against. Very good. Waylun, dua against. Likulli, for every, which makes it relevant. Doesn't matter. Time here is not a factor. Likulli, for every. Likulli, for every. Humaza and lumaza. Humaza is a word. This is the only place in the Quran that it appears, as well as lumaza. Now, al-lams, وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Hammaz also exists, meaning the verb in different forms exists. But in this form, this is the only place that it exists. طيب. The form is fu'ala. Fu'ala, in terms of the Arabic, what is it? The awzan. And here he says, many of the nuha, that it means that it's the excessive form of the verb where the verb becomes a habit of the individual. It's not that he does it, it's that it's a part of who he is now. It's a habit. It's a regular habit. It's hard to get rid of. أصبح من العادة. And this is why there are people, they call them like lu'ana, meaning min kathrat al-la'n. Because he just keeps on cursing all the time, he's known as هذا رجل lu'ana. This is a nickname for it, right? And there's other examples for this as well. Now the interesting thing, while we're talking about the form, later when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threatens them with the fire, He uses a name for the fire that doesn't also appear in the Quran except in this surah, which is what? Al-Hutama. And the interesting thing is, it's on the same wazn. It's also fu'ala. Meaning the name of the hellfire that Allah gives it in this surah matches the verb form that Allah is describing them with, to indicate that the punishment matches what they did. Right? هذا من باب الجزاء من جنس العمل. This is a rule in Islam. We have it from أصل من أصول الفقه that the punishment or the reward always match the crime or the good deed that the person did. And so here, because their bad deed was such, and even linguistically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala matched linguistically their punishment. And so we'll get into this. Now, what does Humazah and Lumazah mean? This is, Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah counts like 7 different opinions on what Al-Humazah and Al-Lumazah mean. Ibn Abbas is on record saying, Al-Hammaz huwa al-Mughtab, wal-Lammaz huwa al-Mu'yab, ay alladhi ya'ibu an-nas. Okay? So, this is the opinion of Ibn Abbas. We're going to count a few opinions inshallah ta'ala. Because not all the 7 are the same. Some of them there's overlap. Al-Hammaz, a person who does hams, the first one, Humazah, is the person who backbites others. So what he's mentioning is backbiting. Now it's not necessarily incorrect, it's just negative about the individual. And Al-Lumazah, this is according to this one opinion, that's attributed to Abdullah ibn Abbas, is the person who indicates the faults of the people, meaning he's ridiculing them and he's belittling them, etc. So they're both bad. He's walking around backbiting, he's walking around mentioning their faults, which means he's also walking around gossiping about them. And he's just talking, not a problem. So this is one indication. This seems to be very correct. Another opinion says no, Humazah with the ha is any type of denigration that a person does physically, meaning through their actions. Okay, this is physical. And Lumazah, because it has the lam, huwa al-aibu bil-lisan. Al-Humazah huwa al-aibu bil-fi'l, wal-Lumazah al-aibu bil-lisan. Meaning that you're ridiculing them, you're belittling them with your tongue, with your words. So the first one is with actions, the second one is with words. This is also an opinion that exists, right? Another opinion is that it's the opposite. So some have said that no, al-hamzu bil-lisan wal-lamzu bil-fi'l. But this one is a weaker opinion. Another one, they said al-hamzu lughatan min al-unf. وَلِذَلِكَ سُمِّيَتِ الْهَمْزَةِ بِالْهَمْزَةِ. So al-hamza is what? It's a letter. What's the letter? Does anybody know what the letter is called in English? It has a name. It's not a hamza. Linguistically, according to linguistics, they call it what? A glottal stop. Right? Because it's very violent. And this is why, by the way, this is why some dialects of the Arabs omit, I should say, not omit the hamza. They don't do the hamza. In fact, the language of the people of Hijaz, and specifically Quraysh, meaning the Prophet ﷺ himself, right? This is his dialect that he spoke regularly with the people. They omit the hamza regularly. And we know this. Tracking linguistics back, we know this. This is why the recitation of Ahlul Madinah, by the way, this is a little dars on qira'at, just for the sake of this surah. The qira'ah that we recite, which is Hafs an Asim, where does it originate? It's in Kufa. It's a Kufan dialect, which is actually Eastern Arabia. And it's just different than the Western Arabian dialect, which is generally the Hijazi dialect. In that dialect, this same surah is recited very different. For example, at the very end, we say, إِنَّهَا عَلَيْهِمْ مُؤْصَدَةً. We put a hamza, mu'sada. And it's a stress, right? To do. This is why the hamza, it's a violent letter. This is where it comes from. The hamza, because it's a stop. Mu'sada. You have to stop and go. This is why one of the recitations, I think it's the recitation of Khalaf, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert in qira'at. They stop at every hamza. There's a complete stop. So the person would say, إِنَّهَا عَلَيْهِمْ مُؤْصَدَةً, like this, in order to clarify that there is a hamza. Now the recitation of the people of Hijaz, how do they recite it? They say, إِنَّهَا عَلَيْهِمْ مُوصَدَةً. There's no hamza, musada. And if you look in the original masahif, is there a hamza? Is the hamza written? No. The hamza, the only time that it would be written is when it has an alif. And so they would put an alif fi makan al-hamza. This is why now at times we'll write like a hamza with an alif, and an alif with a hamza on top. But in fact, it's just a hamza. There's no alif, because there's no mad. And this is just a linguistic thing. Yeah. So this recitation is correct when the person says musada, and it seems to be the recitation of Ahlul Madinah and the people of Hijaz in general, which is not to say that there's one that's more correct over the other. This is the whole issue of the qira'at, which is not a problem. I'm mentioning this because which one seems to be more later in time? It's where the hamzas were later dropped, right? To make saying things easier. This is why we do the same thing in English with the letter T. Nobody says mountain. What do? Mountain. Because the T is tough, and so the idgham and just eating it away, these letters, is an eventual characteristic of the language. We drop, for example, the GHT in night and eight, right? We don't say acht and nacht, but that's how they were originally said. But we drop them because these are violent lay, and we like to make things easier and all these other things. So, going back, the hamza, the letter comes from that idea of it being a little violent or harsh. Huwa min al-unf, as many have indicated, that it's harsh. And so Humazah is a person that is harsh in dealing with others. All of this was to say it's that harshness. And Al-Humazah is where the person is harsh in his language. So one is harsh in his behavior, one is harsh in his language towards other people, and obviously specifically towards the Muslims, as we know. Some have said, so this is a third opinion. Fourth, or what are we on? Fifth opinion, it says that Al-Humazah bil-muwajaha wal-Humazah min khalfi dhahri. Al-Humazah is a person who is harsh and disrespectful to your face, and Lumazah is the person who is harsh behind your back. Very good. A lot of different opinions. All of them seem to be indicating the same thing. These people are disrespectful. There's an element of backbiting. There's an element of using harsh language, harsh behavior, disrespect, total disregard, sometimes lying, outright fabricating, etc., etc. Makes sense? This exists even in our day. A ton of Islamophobes, people who are hating Islam. But what's sad is that when Muslims do it to one another, we backbite one another, we disrespect one another, we're disregarding one another. There's a lot of these elements too, and this is why the surah still remains relevant for a person to realize, wait a second, I can't harm another Muslim. I can't be harsh, can't be violent in any way. I can't make fun of them to their face or make fun of them behind their back even. A person might say, oh, well, he's not here, it's okay. Or if he's here, it's okay. And some people are like, I don't want to backbite, so I'll disrespect him to his face. That's okay. Because I'm not backbiting at least, right? It's still wrong because you're disrespecting him. So we have to realize that it's still applicable, inshallah ta'ala, and we have to be careful. Tayyib. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to describe this type of person, meaning the person who's generally disrespecting of others, disregarding them, ridiculing them, mocking them, etc. What's inside of this type of person's heart? If this is how he is with people, with others, what type of person is this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَهُ. The one who jama'a, gathers, malan, wealth, right, money, وَعَدَّدَهُ. And he, what's عَدَّدَهُ? He counts it. And it's not, so count in Arabic would usually be وَعَدَّ. But there's two dals. وَعَدَّدَهُ meaning بَالَغَ فِي عَدِّهِ. Yani he's not just counting it. This guy is, every day he's counting his money. Even if it doesn't grow. Even if it's the same money, he doesn't make any changes to it, he's still counting it. Meaning he derives pleasure from simply counting his money. Is he an accountant? Maybe. But it seems to be, and this type of person is a person who lives for his money. Yani money becomes his deen, his religion. This is what he lives for. Sure, وَعَدَّدَ. So some have said, and this is the next ayah has indicated something similar, which is وَعَدَّدَهُ لِمَاذا أي أنه يعده لشيء مستقبل. Some have said وَعَدَّدَ means that he's preparing it, and he's counting it so much that he's saving it for something. What is he saving it for? The next verse will answer this, which is where it says يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَهُ. He assumes, يَحْسَبُ. And it's interesting that he uses this word, يحسب, which means I assume. But some qira'at actually say يحسب, meaning he's doing math. He's adding up. Yani he's literally an accountant in this regard. يحسب. But this is a tertiary recitation. The one that we do, قرأها العامة, يحسب أن that ماله, this wealth, أخلده, will make him what? Eternal, live forever. Meaning he's gathering all this wealth, thinking that this wealth is going to allow him to live forever. And there are people that are like this. They think that their money is going to protect them from getting sick, from any calamity, any harm. It's like, oh, nothing is going to happen to us. We have enough money. We'll be taken care of. No problem. I keep on wanting to say inshallah, but obviously this type of person is not going to say inshallah. But the idea, you know, we understand the idea, is that he is hoping and assuming, and so this becomes his religion. This is his faith. So the person who has disrespect and disregard for others, clearly, on the inside, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the state of his heart. He's corrupt. He has that extreme love for wealth. Obviously, it is very normal and natural for people to love wealth. But this person is clearly taking it to an extreme, where he's literally counting it, looking at it, etc. There was a lady, subhanAllah, my wife showed me this the other day. There was a lady who, she said her husband worked a regular job. It wasn't like any spectacular job. It wasn't, you know what I mean, he wasn't like a high, big shot. He didn't own his own business or anything, but he had a job. But she said, my whole life, I struggled with this guy because he was so stingy and cheap, where he would count money when he would give me to go buy groceries by the penny. By the penny. Yani, not even, yani he would give her, he wouldn't even trust her with her own card. La bil, yani, money, here you go, by the penny, here you go, nothing extra, nothing. And she said every day he would log onto his computer just to look at his bank account. And he would never show me what he's looking at. Yani in terms of the money. He would look at his, he has money here, he has money here, wherever he was. And he would drive, she said, he would feel like this is, he's like, okay, it's there. Kind of like he's getting relief and he's enjoying looking at his money. Passed away suddenly in his 50s, so he hadn't retired yet. And so when she went to go get access to the bank, it turns out that he had over $500,000 saved up over the years. And she's like, I had assumed the entire time that we were dirt poor because of the way that he was treating me. And it turns out that he was just an extreme saver. He was just saving up money like crazy for something, and he never had any plans. And we lived in a tiny house. He didn't want to spend any. Our car was 20 years old. We shared the same car. It was like terrible. And this guy was sitting on over $500,000. This is just one example. Obviously we know many, but this comes to mind because this person, what is he gathering that money for? And then you feel bad. Obviously he's non-Muslim, so he spent his entire life saving that money to do what? And then he just died. He neither enjoyed it in this dunya. He's definitely not going to enjoy it in the hereafter. What was it? What was its purpose? And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us, it's not asking us. He's talking about this person who wrongfully assumes that the wealth can avail him from eternity or from death or from anything that he expects it to do. If Allah is going to take care of you, He's going to take care of you. This doesn't mean that obviously we don't work, but it means that the person who believes sincerely that the money itself is what protects him or brings benefit, this person is wrongly, and he's assuming wrong. طيب. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers this by saying, Kalla, no. Kalla in the Quran is to negate what comes before, to say that that's a lie, that's incorrect, and that what's coming is actually the truth. Kalla, no. لينبذن لا لام التوكيد وقالوا إنها جواب القسم قسم محذوف. They said that it's the answer for a qasam that's actually not there. لام التوكيد, and it's a must. لينبذن. لينبذن means he will be left, thrown in there and abandoned. Thrown and abandoned, left. في الحطمة, in the حطمة. Remember we said Al-Hutama, linguistically the form of it, it's one of the names of the hellfire. It matches Humazah. So here's the first one, where it matches this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying he's going to be left there. It's interesting that He uses the word left, لَيُنْبَذَنَّ, because the person, remember the punishment always fits the crime. And one of the scholars of the tafsir, I found this amazing. He said that the person gathered his wealth and cared for it so much, now he's getting the opposite treatment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not caring for him whatsoever, and in fact is going to abandon him completely in the hereafter. Throw him in there and never look at him or care for him or talk to him or address him ever again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the hellfire. So he's going to be left there, fil hutama. Now this word al-hutama, nobody knows what it means. At the moment that it was revealed, this is not a word that any of the Arabs ever used. It's not a word that the Prophet ﷺ was even familiar with. Which is why he says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةِ. And how would you know what al-hutama is? Remember we said, anytime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ, that means that this is a concept that would be completely foreign to the Prophet ﷺ. He doesn't know what this is before, which also by extension means that the Arabs had no familiarity with this word either. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ means they don't know what this is. مَا الْحُطَمَةِ. What is al-hutama? And then Allah answers, نَارُ اللَّهِ الْمُوقَدَةِ. It is the fire of Allah that is lit. Al-muqada, meaning it's on fire and will continue to be so for eternity. Allah makes it His to indicate that He has prepared this specifically as a punishment for people. The fire of Allah. It's a very scary concept when you think about it this way. Narullah al-muqada. And it's lit. This indicates also that it's already lit and it will continue to be lit. It's not waiting to listen. It's ready from now. Even though we're still in the dunya, right? And this is Aqidah point and it has its own discussion relevant to it. Then he describes it and he says, التي تطلع على الأفئدة. It is the one, what does the word تطلع mean? Yeah, we use the word اطلع now to see, right? To look. But طلوع الشمس is where it comes out. Or it seeks it. Right? And تطلع means that the fire is seeking the hearts of these individuals. Why? Because it's the heart that was corrupt from the beginning. Remember, the punishment is going to fit the crime. And so here, he's talking about the corruption of the heart, and this is why the fire is going to reach the heart. And then when it does reach it, and some of the indications it mentions, obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will recreate them. And then the fire will go back and make its way towards the person's heart. If it reaches the heart, obviously, there's death for that individual, but they don't die. But it's as if they're dead in the hellfire. It's death without dying. And this is why it's terrible. It's such a terrible punishment. Also, it indicates that the punishment of the hellfire is worse on the emotional aspect of the person that's there. The emotional aspect, the psychological aspect, right, the heart, from the heart's perspective, is worse than the physical aspect. Now, hold on, we didn't say this yet also, which is, what does linguistically hutama mean? Hutama mentioned is one of the names of the fire. But what does it linguistically mean? Al-hutama, it means the crusher. Tahtim means to crush, right? So hutama here means that these people are being crushed. Whatever's inside is going to be completely obliterated. Which is that the fire is not just a fire, but there's a physical element to it as well. Remember that what they used to do to these believers, Humazah, if we take it to mean physical, and Lumazah, meaning verbal, that now there's an element of the fire that the fire is not necessarily violent. But now, fire can be. But I'm saying in terms of physical, like there's an abrasiveness, al-hutama, crushing, is a physical element. Right, as well as obviously the fire itself. And Allah knows best. She says, in التي تطلع على الأفئدة, the one that seeks out and goes and comes upon the hearts. إنها عليهم مؤصدة. Indeed, it is, meaning the fire, عليهم, upon them, مؤصدة. What's مؤصدة? Directed. If a person says, أصدت الباب أي أغلقته, right? الباب آصد or آصد means that the door is closed. مؤصدة means it's closing in. مؤصدة means it's closed in on them. مؤصدة, that they're tied up as well, right? And it seems to be both are obviously correct, meaning there's no escape from the fire. The fire is closed in on them. And it's interesting, the scholar said that just like they used to gather their wealth and put it in like a safe place for safekeeping, so it can never leave. They want to put it in a place where nobody can get to it. He says similarly their punishment is that they're put in a place and nobody can get to them. وَلِعَذْبِ اللَّهِ, may Allah protect us. Right? They're closed in on this. There's no getting out. They're in a place that they had almost wished that their wealth was. And now it's on them. And then he says, فِي عَمَدٍ مُمَدَّدَةٍ, Amad are columns. Mumaddada, they're drawn out, they're extended. It's to indicate how secure the fire is, how terrible it is, how large. Amad, and these is huge spaces just for the fire, and that these are columns of fire. They're tied to them. Some have indicated that these columns are actually closing in on the doors of the fire itself to prevent anybody from escaping. It's no escape. It's to indicate an eternity that they're living in. This is why it's obviously a very terrible in terms of punishment and an abode. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He protects us from the fire. Remember, all of this is to say that the surah is a threat from beginning to end. And it mentions, if we look, how there are, the punishments are always going to be similar to the crimes that these people are doing. And we talked about the relevance for us as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the hellfire. And of course, there's that linguistic matching of whatever it is that they were doing before. Does anybody have any questions, inshallah ta'ala? Or any comments? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
How do you look at it?
Shh.
You can look at your balance anytime you want.
Yeah. No. So that obviously that's fine. If a person needs to check, they can check. But are there people who derive pleasure from just checking? It seems to be this person is like, yes, you know what I mean? Like he has that that idea of like that stinginess, and this is like what he's living for almost. And clearly as Muslims, we shouldn't be living for this. Yes, we have the wealth. This is why they tell you the wealth should be in your hand, but not in your heart. نِعْمَ الْمَالُ الصَّالِحِ لِلْعَبْدُ الصَّالِحِ. Well, they say, the wealth is such a good tool for the righteous servant because he can use it in a proper way. But it doesn't enter here. Because clearly the surah is talking about the people who this is what they live for. This is their religion. This is their deen. It's almost like this is what they worship. Are there people who worship the dollar and the dime? Yes. And the Prophet talks about this. تَعِسَ عَبْدُ الدِّرْهَمْ تَعِسَ عَبْدُ الدِّنَارِ تَعِسَ عَبْدُ الْخَمِيصَةِ. Which is even worse. Like it's like a penny, less than a penny. Ta'isa, meaning he's, wretched is he, the person who is the slave or the servant of the dinar and the dirham and all these things. Because this is what he lives for. He worships it. Obviously he doesn't worship it by, the same way. The worship is internal, it's in the heart. And this is, yeah, go ahead.
So what is the connection between those who backbite and harm the Muslims?
He's stingy. How are these two connected? Yes. It's that, why is this guy, and this is what one of the scholars said. Jazakallah khair for bringing this up. So he said, so what the question is, what is the connection between Al-Humazah and Al-Humazah, the person who's backbiting, belittling these Muslims, and then him gathering this wealth? It's his, Allahu A'lam, this is one scholar who said, it's the person's self-perception and worth. When a person puts down others, he does it to do what to himself? To prop himself up. And then furthermore, the wealth is to help him do what? Also prop himself up. That means that internally, he knows that he's nothing. He knows that he's a la shay, and he's worthless. I'm only worth something when I have money. There are literally people who, they want to gather money for the simple reason, for them to be valuable. But aslan, your value as a person has nothing to do with your wealth. قيمة المرء ليس ما يحسنه. There's a verse of poetry. I found it amazing. So he said, obviously, here. I'm looking for the. Oh, I don't have it here. What is the worth of the person? Ali ibn Abi Talib, this is attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib, where he said, the worth of the person, they used to say, is what he's good at. You're only worth what you're good at. So if this person is good at, computers, technology, that's what you're good for. This person is a doctor, this person is an engineer, this person does whatever, that's your worth. But he said, no. قِيمَةُ الْمَرْءِ مَا يَطْلُبُهُ, that the worth of the person is what he seeks. And his intention, his goals, his aspirations are way more valuable than just what he's good at for the time being. Because that might go out of fashion. That might not, it could be worth something now and then later it's not worth much. But what you aspire for, your goals, your aspirations, lofty issues, that's much more valuable. And that's why the person is worth that. And obviously, clearly, these types of people have no aspirations, nothing. And the only thing that they're busy doing is putting down others and then trying to boost himself up by gaining more wealth, thinking that this is going to make him live forever or be remembered forever, or however a person wants to think of it. So Wallahu A'lam, this is one of the connections. But Allah knows best. We don't. Yeah, تفضل. وإياكم إن شاء الله. Yeah. Uh-huh. صحيح. Yes.
I think the description of these people and their action was well fitting with whom they are.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Looking at the Muslim,
Yeah, those specific people.
they are poor people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good observation. That's very good. So just for the people who can't hear what the brother said, he's saying that it obviously, if it's talking about, and it is in some way, like we said before, the people of Mecca, these Sanadid, like Al-Walid ibn Mughira and Ubay ibn Ka'b, Ubay ibn Khalaf, and these people, they would sit around gossiping, ridiculing the Muslims, etc. And many of them were wealthy. All of them were wealthy and rich. And this was, so obviously it's describing these types of people, 100%. Because it obviously gave them that free time. All they're going to do is sit around and ridicule and mock and make fun of the Muslims. So yeah, 100%. Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and bless you all. And inshallah ta'ala you all have a good night. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك